Russia launched another round of strikes across Ukraine. I mean, how would you characterize the state of this conflict right now?
Well, I see it pretty much as a stalemate on the ground. Obviously, President Putin is trying to attack the people of Ukraine, trying to sap their morale rather than fighting on the front lines right now. It's pretty clear that during the winter there has been somewhat of a stalemate. We've stayed focused on Bakhmut, but that really is operationally a small element of what's really needed to happen on the ground.
So just talk about Bakhmut a little bit more, because Zelenskyy visited the Ukrainian military positions today. UK intelligence has put out something suggesting that Russia's efforts to take the city seem to be losing momentum. So what are the implications of what's happening in Bakhmut for the broader context of this war?
Well, I don't think on the broader context of the war, Bakhmut makes a bit of a difference at all. It's a small city. It's got some routes coming in or out that would be important, but it's more of a propaganda victory, whichever side takes it. Obviously, this is much like Verdun in the First World War, wasn't significant except in a propaganda sense.
So why... you look at the carnage in the battle, right? It is just wave after wave of Russians going in there, and battle-hardened Ukrainians, and there's a high death toll on both sides. I mean, is that propaganda victory that valuable when you look at the sheer human toll in that city?
Well, I think it's very important to President Zelenskyy, which is why I think he flew in there today to support his troops. This is very much like Mariupol was about 9 months ago. And Mariupol, candidly, was far more strategic because it gave access to the water. But I think this is just both commanders, Putin and Zelenskyy, trying to outdo each other to proclaim to their people a major victory and to keep this war going.
You mentioned President Zelenskyy was in there. He flew in there, as you said. They've been asking for fighter jets, the Ukrainian demand. Poland and Slovakia have answered the call to some degree with a small supply of MiGs and MiG parts. Can that help? Is that enough to change the stalemate, as you said, on the ground? Is that enough air power to help shift things in any meaningful way?
I don't think so, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think we've got to recognize that the Russians have brought in some of the most advanced air defense systems in the planet. Now, if those planes are being brought in as part of an overall counteroffensive that's an air-ground battle, which your forces are well acquainted with, yes, they can complement that. Yes, they can support that. But these are not groundbreaking, game-changing weapon systems that are coming in.
So on the diplomatic and political front, President Putin met with President Xi Jinping this week, where Putin welcomed China's controversial proposals for peace in Ukraine. The U.S. is warning that it could be a stalling tactic to help Russian troops on the ground in Ukrainian territory. What's your assessment of what's happening there?
Well, I think it's not only a stalling tactic, but it could well be that President Putin is trying to freeze this conflict, trying to let facts on the ground stalemate where they are right now, much like the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea, much like Kashmir. If he can freeze this conflict, then he can effectively take the gains he has made in the Donbass and make them semi-permanent as long as there's a ceasefire and a stalemate.
So stalemate, ceasefire, you talk about sort of things are kind of entrenched, especially in a place like Bakhmut right now. President Biden, he's going to be here tomorrow. He's going to meet with the Prime Minister Trudeau. Cooperation on Ukraine obviously would be on the agenda. At this point, when you look at that situation, can Western allies do anything to sort of break this stalemate and stop this war from turning into a multi-year, long-term conflict?
Yeah, well, for a little self-promotion, I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago, saying that while Putin is wasting his efforts on ground attacks in places such as Bakhmut and air attacks against the population who seem, like the British during World War II, unwilling to break their determination and resolve, that the Ukrainians should use the wintertime to reset, resupply, get as much equipment in there as possible, and be ready for a spring counteroffensive. Now, we haven't heard a lot about that, and I'm glad, because that means that if they are planning it, the operational security is very good. If they are set, they do have the possibility for a limited counteroffensive, which to me would look much like the September counteroffensives that took back so much land for the Ukrainians.
Just as a final point, U.S. officials, a lot of Western leaders say they're going to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Congress appropriated $112 billion in military and economic support in a single year, and there are signs in public opinion polling in the United States of a softening of support, a growing number of Americans who feel the United States is giving too much, and you're certainly seeing that on the Republican side of the presidential primary season that's happening now, where it's becoming a bit of an issue. How worried are you about that? How worried should Ukraine be with that shifting public and political dynamic in the U.S.?
Well, I think Zelenskyy understands if the U.S. goes wobbly, the entire coalition will go wobbly. And this is what President Putin is counting on. And this is no longer simply the number of tanks and aircraft we send, but this is the real necessity is the leadership in these countries to be able to stand up and make the case, not only in the United States, but in Canada, in Germany, in the United Kingdom as well. The only way Zelenskyy has a chance of winning is that he gets the full support of the allies behind him. And if the populations go wobbly, it's over for President Zelenskyy's ambition to retake his entire country.
Mark Kimmitt, we really appreciate the insight. Thank you for joining us, General. That's retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt.
Thanks.